going to lead off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. McGuinness, for your presentation. Coming from St. John's South Mount Pearl, that's in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, I can tell you, sir, that the overwhelming response from all sectors of our fishing industry is positive to this deal. When it comes to processors, the Processing Association, when it comes to the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, and when it comes to the union, the Fish, Food, and Allied Workers Union, which represents plant workers, fishermen, trawlermen, everybody's in agreement that this is seen as a positive, as a good deal. Also, as a former journalist myself, I covered fisheries for a lot of years. I know firsthand of the impact of high tariffs on our industries like shrimp. That said, there are some questions that are outstanding. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the province is being compensated to the tune of $280 million from the federal government of Canada, $120 million from the province. The province is kicking in money as well for compensation for giving up minimum processing requirements, which has been we've had in Newfoundland and Labrador for a dog's age. So my first question, from your perspective, sir, is from the perspective of the association representing processors across Canada. From your perspective, sir, what do you see as the impact of Newfoundland and Labrador lifting minimum processing requirements?
I tell you what, I'll use an example. Bottom line, our position is that minimum processing requirements don't protect jobs. Bottom line is if the harvesting and delivering that product to shore, and then in terms of also then putting it into the processing plant, and it's not going to make economic sense, then that's not going to happen. The government can introduce rules, but the company really operates in terms of making, if you will, making sound decisions. So what happens there is you don't necessarily protect that job, but what happens is that in the harvesting side, that quota is either not fully harvested or it's basically left in the water. And I'll give you a good example. Bottom line, in terms of minimum processing requirement, as you say, Newfoundland and Labrador has them in place, Nova Scotia doesn't have them in place, New Brunswick doesn't have them in place, PEI doesn't have them in place, and British Columbia no longer. And Fisheries Council of Canada worked with the industry in British Columbia and with Minister's Fast Office in terms of eliminating that last vestige. What they had in British Columbia, you have a roe herring fishery in British Columbia. You have a roe herring fishery in Alaska, and the roe herring business salted roe herring business was absolutely excellent because basically you sell it into Japan, and it was a high gift price in terms of their New Year. Now, what happened over time? Two things happened over time. The market for that product declined quite substantially, and then. At the same time, in terms of the stocks, both in Alaska and in British Columbia, what was happening is there were certain components of them were becoming extremely small, and that resulted in the fact that, with respect to the prices, it was not economical any longer, if you will, to be able to take out the roe from the small females. So
can I interrupt? I've only got a few minutes to ask questions, and I want to stick to the impact of minimum processing requirements.
I'll tell you. So what happened is that the Alaskans, without a minimum processing requirement, basically adjusted. What they did is they sent the smaller product to, say, for example, Korea, that was further processed there, and then sold into Japan. And meanwhile, basically what was happening in BC is that the smaller herring the seiners would not be going out to harvest them. So we were reducing landed value. And we were then in the marketplace, the Alaskans could sell to the Japanese and say, we not only have roe herring here, but we have food herring, where our people could only sell that. So bottom line it was understood then that what was happening then, the overall pie was declining.
Well, let me cut to the chase and ask you.
I just want to say...
No, let me just... I want to get so much time.
Okay.
The lifting of minimum processing requirements in Newfoundland and Labrador, the elimination of those rules, that will not result in any job losses in Newfoundland and Labrador? That's a question.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you what Earl McCurdy said in the telegram with respect to Union exploring shipping out unprocessed cod. Okay.
I've read those stories, sir.
I'll tell you what it said. More broadly, McCurdy said he believes minimum processing requirements are a relic of a different era. In 2013, the regulations made it uneconomical to fish, which meant part of the quota wasn't caught. That whole policy area has to be rethought. There's no good having a bunch of regulations and having fish left in the water. That benefits no one. So what I'm saying...
So let me ask you this question again then, sir. The lifting of minimum processing requirements in Newfoundland and Labrador, do you think that that will result in any job losses in our plants? Yes or no?
As a result of that, well, it's an unfair question. I look at the fishery overall. I'm saying that the continuation of those processing plants, of those processing rules, will cause, if you will, a reduced value of the fisheries. We already see this in yellowtail flounder. You know that in Newfoundland and Labrador, because of the small size of yellowtail flounder, and because of the minimum processing requirement, some of those quotas are left in the water. So if you just want to look at one little piece, you can make some sort of comment. But if you want to take a holistic type of approach to an issue, and that's what the Fishery Council of Canada does, you come to the only conclusion that the maintaining a minimum processing required is negative to the benefits of people working in the fishing industry, whether it's processors and harvesters.
Again, Mr. McGinnis, I want to highlight the fact that this deal is generally seen in Newfoundland and Labrador as a good deal. But there are also questions. And one of the questions that's being asked, a central question, is what exactly Newfoundland and Labrador is giving up by agreeing to the elimination of minimum processing requirements. What impact that will have on the processing sector. But as you just note, you have to look at the big picture, not just one piece of the pie, but the whole pie. Mm-hmm. Another concern that's being raised, and this was a concern that was raised shortly after last fall when the Conservative government announced the CETA deal, the broad conceded deal. The concern that was raised was out of the media report, was as a result of media reports out of the EU. And the media reports, basically, the way the EU was selling this package is that as a result of the CETA deal, the lifting of minimum processing requirements, EU countries like Spain and Portugal, for example, will have access to more raw Canadian fish. This is how, let me read it to you. Under Fisheries, the memo states that in addition to the elimination of tariffs, the fish package also includes other elements of interest to EU firms, such as better access to Canadian fish for the EU processing industry. So, again, simple question, cut right to the chase. Will this deal result in EU processing companies getting more access to raw Canadian fish?
Well, the thing is that Newfoundland's not unique. A cod in Newfoundland, a cod in Nova Scotia are relatively the same. They have access to all sorts of Atlantic Canada fish because there's no processing restrictions in Nova Scotia. There's no processing restrictions in New Brunswick. There's no processing restrictions in PEI. So you have. I mean, bottom line, the thing is that it's hard, as I say. I mean, it's really difficult to see, what the fact that Newfoundland and Labrador has a minimum processing restriction. In terms of the impact on the marketplace, in terms of getting raw material, I mean, it's never come to me that that's a problem. And from the foreign countries or foreign buyers.
Ask about the $400 million. So, the $400 million, the $280 million from the feds, for example, 120 from the province. What exactly is that for? If it's not compensation for a loss?
Well, I think there's no question what's happening. Whether you had the CETA deal or whatever, is the industry in Newfoundland and Labrador has significant problems, and you know that there was that major study that identified that 30% of the harvesting vessels were not profitable, like 40% of the processing plants were not profitable. There's no question, and not, basically that report's there, and so there's no question there has to be consolidation. There's no question that a number of those plants and those communities around Newfoundland are going to evaporate. Now, the effort, I think, in terms of this funding is basically to help that transition. That's in the sense of the plants, and those plants now very much populated by people in 45, 55, 65, and so there's some intent, if you will, to hopefully transition those people in those communities in terms of just the evolution, if you will, in terms of the fisheries and things of that nature. So whether CETA came in or not, that was going to happen. Now, whether CETA, what CETA may do is that because of seeing the opportunities, if we don't restructure ourselves to see the opportunities, we may lose some opportunities. So it may accelerate, if you will, people saying, hey, we got an opportunity here, we're going to have to work more collaboratively. I mean, we're going to have, if you will, better communications, better working together between the harvesters, the unions, and the processors. So that is what we hope will happen. Now, that's itself, the evolution of that type of approach will mean that companies the Berry Group will maybe start looking at it with collaborations and so forth. So that is what we see happening. Now, bottom line, CETA may give the pivot to make that thing go forward. In our view, and I think in the view of the fishing industry, and also the view, I think, for Newfoundland and Labrador, that's a good thing. You're either going to move forward or you're going to be swept away.
Thank you very much.